Good morning, everyone. Good Saturday morning. And we're looking at the elemental tablet of water. And I've lightly double stick taped the sigil, or the symmetrical character, for the angel or the governor Pascombe, who, at least in the 1580s, according to the angels, were Pascombe ruled the area of what is now Syria, one of the 91 parts of the earth. Now, in groups of 7, this entire tablet is filled with those angels, and 3 other tablets also. And together, all 4 make up the great table, which we're talking about today. We are on chapter 24 of Enochian Vision Magic. And we'll pick up where we left off yesterday. During the working of Monday, June 25th, 1584, Kelley was given a vision of 4 blank grids, each of which was 12 squares wide by 10-inch squares high. These grids were said to represent the 4 quarters of the unlettered Great Table of the vision of just a few days earlier. As the vision proceeded, little pricks or dots began to appear in the squares. Kelley was instructed to connect the dots in groups of 7, which created sigils, each forming a curious pattern. And remember, those were, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself. When he was through connecting the dots, all but 8 of the 624 squares that make up the 4 grids were covered by 88 characters, each unique in form, each covering 7 squares, but none which intruded upon another character's squares. These symbols were identified as true images of God, his spiritual creatures. Now, we know that these zigzagging lines that fill column 6 in chapter 18's figure 3 are. Okay, just to refresh your memory, there's the squiggly lines. Okay. They didn't, even though this is a back chapter, it's not back in time in the chronology of events. They're called symmetrical, S-Y-M-M-E-T-R-I-C-A-L. Symmetrical characters because each one is formed from the same number of pricks. In this case, 7. Once the blank grids were filled with the lines of the symmetrical characters, Kelley was instructed to fill in the squares with letters. Okay. Maybe I have an illustration of that. But if you can imagine this, the squares are unlettered squares. 4 sets of 156 squares each, and they're empty. And then they're filled in with pricks, and the lines are connected to the pricks, and then the tablets are just filled with the sigils. No letters yet. Kelley was then instructed to fill in the squares with letters. Starting at the top left of each grid and moving to the right, letters began to appear to Kelley one by one. Some of the letters were capitalized, but most were not. A few of the capitalized letters appeared to be written backwards. Okay, so just imagine those 4 blank squares, no letters, put together in a big square like that. Try to imagine there's not letters there. And then each of those squares filled with those 91 symmetrical characters. And then the angels started to fill in, where am I? They started to fill in the letters. They dictated the letters like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and all the way across, just one by one. Then when they finished the top row, they went down here and did the second row. Zoot, 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 like that. When all 4 grids were filled in with letters and characters, it became clear that the characters spelled out names. Not only that, but each of those 88 names also began with a capital letter and contained no other capital letter among the remaining 6. This phenomenon in and of itself is impressive, but it is nothing compared to what Dee and Kelley would learn next. Within a few hours, and with a few helpful hints from the angels, the 2 magicians discovered, to their utter amazement, that the symmetrical characters spelled all but 3 of the divine names of the 91 parts of the earth, names that had been given days earlier in the form of a list. Figure 67 shows an example of how the divine name of the second part of the earth, Pascum, is spelled out by its symmetrical character. Okay. The symmetrical character came first, and then the letters were applied. And then they discovered that when they read the sigil, they spelled the names of governing angels that were delivered to Dee and Kelley in visions weeks earlier. Figure 67 shows an example of how the divine names of the second part of the earth, Pascum, is spelled out by its symmetrical character. All 4 grids were filled with similar characters, all spelling out with few minor irregularities the names of 88 of the 91 parts of the earth. The next day, the angels tidied up this array by joining the 4 12 by 13 grids with a central cross and turning it into one great table. And it looked like that. And there's that black cross in the middle. And it's got letters that we'll talk about a little later. The letters of the 3 missing divine names of the parts of the earth were found distributed in the central cross, sometimes referred to as the Black Cross or the Great Central Cross. And the mysterious 92nd name, Paraoan, was created from certain of the backwards letters that occupied the squares left vacant by the symmetrical characters. See chapter 24. Things were wrapped up pretty neatly. Before we continue, I'd like to again stress how impressive was this method of reception. Enochian scholar and magician David R. Jones wrote, "The student of Enochian can compare the lists of names with the sigils, which formulate their existence on the watchtowers, and easily see the correlation. But realize that the names were delivered first, and then the watchtowers horizontally, line by line, and after having both figures in hand. The angels demonstrated that by discrete, 7 letters, the number of 7 in each of the governor's names, by discrete linear connections, all of the letters given in the watchtower could be accounted for from letters that formulate the names of the governors previously given. This would require either a monumental and complex second and third order memorization, 2 dimensions to 1 dimension, then back to 2 dimensions with the directional correlation from a 3-dimensional origin to a 3-dimensional conclusion. That's a complex second, third order memorization on Kelley's part, or an elaborate and extremely obtuse deception on Dee's part." And David Jones finishes up this marvelous comment. "This constitutes one of the chief proofs of the system." Unquote. The magicians would eventually be informed that the 91 divine names of the parts of the earth were also the names of 91 governors who inhabit the 30 aethers, or airs, or heavens, that surround the watchtowers like a heavenly glass onion. We've yet to discuss the aethers because their names, see figure 63, column 7, were among the last bits of information Dee and Kelley received in their Enochian magic workings. The lowest of these aethers, Tex, is inhabited by 4 governors. The remaining aethers, including the highest, Lil, each have 3 governors. I will talk more about the aethers in chapter 25. Here it's simply important for us to simply understand that linking the 91 parts of the earth to the 30 aethers was the Enochian way of identifying and linking all levels of divine consciousness from top to bottom. Thus, the dynamics of the Great Table really are a demonstration of how everything in heaven and earth is indeed connected to everything in heaven and earth. Excuse me, I'm going to have a little sip of tea. Chapter 22, the Tabula Recensia. And the epigram is a little quote from Dee's diary, April 20th, 1587. At length E.K., that's Edward Kelley, was willed to go down into his chamber, and I did remain still at our dining table until his return, which was within an hour or somewhat more. At his return, this he brought in writing. And we're going to find out what this is. Such was the amazing genesis of the Great Table, how all of this is connected to the vision of the golden talisman, and the practice of modern Enochian magic will be the subject of the next chapters. Before moving on, however, and in order to more easily illustrate the structure of the system, I need to temporarily tighten up some of the loose ends that the irregularities in the original material often leave dangling in the eyes of the student. The most serious of these concerns, the letterings of the Great Table, and the various names of angels drawn therefrom. Here's the problem. After they initially received the Great Tables, the magicians were obliged to change or add certain letters in some of the squares. To confuse things further, in documents they received both earlier and later, the names of a handful of the 91 governors of the table, whose names are spelled out by the symmetrical characters, and the names of specific angels drawn from the watchtowers of the Great Table, are in subsequent communications spelled a little differently than they appear in the original table. This difference has proven very frustrating to modern Enochian magicians, who naturally would like to be confident in their ability to accurately identify and spell the names of the angels with whom they wish to communicate. There are other loose ends and inconsistencies that plagued Dee and Kelley, one of which was the uncertainty over which compass directions were to be assigned to the four quarters of the Great Table, a problem that Dee appears never to have resolved to his satisfaction. So if we get a little bit confused, so was Dee. Don't worry about it. And one that I have chosen to sidestep completely by not using the directional references to identify the four quarters of the Great Table at all. These inconsistencies, however, pale before what happened in April of 1587, nearly 3 years after Dee and Kelley had ended their Enochian workings. For some reason, Kelley felt compelled to revisit the mysteries of the Great Table, and once and for all settle the questions of unresolved inconsistencies. It's raining very hard out there. It just started. During a conversation with the Archangel Raphael that lasted approximately 1 hour, he claimed to receive the tabula recensa, or reformed table. This table, while correcting a few of the letters, was characterized by one very dramatic change. 3 of the quadrants housing of the 4 watchtowers were shifted to different positions within the table, the full table. So in other words, I'll try to do this without losing my page. Okay, here we see, I guess I will lose my page. Here we see that we've got what will soon be identified as the air tablet, and then we've got the earth tablet here, and the water tablet here, and the fire tablet there. Okay, that's the same order that they appeared identified like that. What's going to change in the tabula recensa is the positioning of each of those elemental tablets. So with the new positioning, this one right here will remain air, but this earth one here is going to be moved to there, and this fire one is going to be moved to there, and this water one is going to be moved to there. Okay. What it did do was change the basic construction of the Great Table. Figure 69, that's this one, shows the new positioning of the Reformed table. The letters with an asterisk became backwards letters, or they indicated the backwards letters. For the duration of the book, I will, for the sake of consistency, try to use the tabula rasa as my main model for both the lettering and the arrangement of the great watchtowers, or the watchtowers of the Great Table. I will say try to use because for nearly the entire Enochian period, the angels reference the original Great Table when explaining the angelic hierarchies and spelling the names of individual angels. It will be necessary from time to time to refer to the original unreformed Great Table, especially when we start discussing the cherubs, see chapter 23 and 24, whose names might be dramatically affected by the Reformed Table's new arrangement. I should remind the reader that in Magick, it is eminently possible for many contradictory ideas to be simultaneously true. In the pages that follow, the alert reader will notice that the names of certain angels are spelled in a manner inconsistent with the original Great Table, the tabula rasa, and or other obvious references within the text. It is probable that particular inconsistencies are the result of subsequent angelic instructions or other extenuating reasons. So in other words, I'm not saying that I don't commit typos in this book. On the contrary, I do, and I am guilty many times. But if you run into an inconsistency in lettering and a spelling of certain angel names, I would advise you to at least give me the benefit of the doubt first before saying this is obviously a Lon typo, when I've done everything I could to, at least in my ability and my knowledge of the system and the various phases this material went through, I've done my best to give us the most accurate that is Lon's humanly possible to deliver. For a practical manual such as this, it would be distracting to the point of absurdity for me to pause, footnote, cross-reference, defend, and explain each and every one of these aberrations, especially considering the fact that in many instances I myself have not been able to track down the source of the differing letters. For those of you whose research will take you deeper into the subject, I have included in Appendix 4 versions of the watchtowers containing all the variations in letterings that I have been able to discover. And for convenience sake, I'm not going to represent the segue between the Enochian magic of Dee and Kelley and Enochian magic that is generally practiced today. Up to this point in the chronology of the adventures of Dee and Kelley, each of the four watchtowers of the Great Table, both the original and the reformed, have been identified by the one of the four great seals. Just those symbols identified and distinguished each of those four tablets, or by certain landmark letters. At different times, the original material, they have been identified by the order they were received or by the directions, east, south, north, west, or north. Nowhere in the surviving documents have I been able to find 4 quadrants of the Great Table overtly identified as elemental tablets of fire, water, air, or earth. That being said, certain clear references in the continuing communications revealed elemental hierarchies and rulerships both of and within the individual watchtowers. Building on this information, the adepts of the Golden Dawn projected an eminently logical elemental structure to the Great Table, its central black cross, and its individual subdivisions. These elemental attributions are the heart and soul of the system of Enochian magic taught and practiced by the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, and most modern practitioners. I personally believe that when these more modern adepts treated the watchtowers as expressions of the elements, they were picking up where Dee and Kelley had stopped and were taking the next logical step in the development of the system. To more easily discuss how all of this is going to relate to a practical application of the system, I will now, and for the remainder of the book, refer to the 4 watchtowers by their modern elemental designations. Please refer to 69. And here I itemize in bullet points. The upper left quadrant of the Reformed Great Table I will now refer to as the watchtower or elemental tablet of air. Upper left. The upper right quadrant of the Reformed Table I will now refer to as the watchtower or elemental tablet of water. That's the upper right. Lower left quadrant of the Reformed Table I will now refer to as the watchtower or elemental tablet of earth. Lower right quadrant of the Reformed Table I will now refer to as the watchtower or elemental tablet of fire. That's the lower right. Now, if we were to project the cherubic images, in other words, the lion, the eagle, the angel, and the bull, representing the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, those are called cherubic images. And those 4 cherubic images representing the fixed signs of the zodiac are projected, say, on tarot cards or in Christian art as the lion, the bull, the angel, and the eagle. And if you're familiar with the tarot, you find those characters in the corners of the Wheel of Fortune card and the Universe card. Those are the exact same positions. Cherubic earth is in the lower, meaning the bull would be in the lower left. The lion of Leo would be in the lower right. The eagle of Scorpio would be in the upper right. And the angel of Aquarius would be in the upper left. That's just how the Reformed tablet projects each of the elemental tablets upon the Great Table. This is how they are identified in most modern Enochian literature. There is a 5th element and a 5th tablet, the tablet of union, that is attributed to the quintessential element spirit. It is much smaller, containing only 20 squares, and its letters are drawn from those on the central black cross of the Great Table, which serves to unite the 4 watchtowers in precisely the same way spirit is said to unite and separate the 4 elements. I'll have more to say about this very important tablet in chapter 26. Okay, that was a mouthful. Tomorrow we will continue this adventure here. Chapter 23, The Great Table Meets the Golden Talisman. So that will be our Sunday school lesson for tomorrow. Until then, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Enjoy your day. I've already got my walk in before it started to rain real hard. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. See you tomorrow.